you see me? Hello?
It was the early 1900s. As the world around Japan was advancing in technology and science, the small country had an ironclad grip on their myths and legends, birthing some of the most horrifying stories and tales to cast their shadow upon the world. The year was 1918, and a man named Ikichi Suzuki purchased a doll for his 2-year-old sister Okiku while he was on a maritime expedition. Upon returning home, he gave the doll to her and she immediately fell in love. The doll is about 40 centimeters tall, dressed in a kimono, had black hair, even cut in the traditional Okappa hairstyle. What drew Akaichi to the doll, however, that convinced him to buy it was its piercing eyes that he felt seemed to grip his soul. The doll, over the next couple of years, evolved into Okiku's favorite toy, until tragically she developed a bad case of influenza and she passed away at the age of 4 due to a fever. The doll was to be buried with Okiku, however, over unforeseen circumstances, that didn't happen, and her family ended up taking the doll and encasing it in a private shrine in their home. As time passed after the tragic events, the family would claim to hear strange noises. They would have horrifying dreams of Okiku pounding on the walls, flickering lights with strange voices. It wasn't until the line was finally crossed one day, someone took a look at the doll and noticed something very hard to spot over time. Ikaichi didn't buy the doll with the hair down to her shoulders. Yeah, that's right. The doll's hair was growing. The family decided to relocate in 1938 and decided to donate the doll to a local temple, fearing that her daughter's spirit was trapped inside of the doll. Today, Okiku is still in her little shrine, located at the Manenji Temple in Iwamaziwa, Hokkaido, Japan. I think I said that right. And yes, you can still go visit her. Apparently she's picky on who gets a photograph her, so be careful. She also has this habit of visiting you in your dreams, whether it's good or bad. And for those of you skeptics out there who are watching this and gonna call immediate BS, there is one thing that was proven. So they took a lock of her hair. Now, I'm not gonna look up the science facts, I'm not gonna do it all in this video, it's not what this video is about, but that is real human hair. There's one more creepy thing to say on this. Legend has it, with photo proof, over time, the doll's mouth has been slowly opening. And if you look carefully enough, if you dare, you just might see a small set of a youngster's teeth. It is not uncommon for a child to act like his doll is a living friend. It is uncommon for them, however, to carry out that same relationship with their doll for the entirety of their life. In 1904, a young boy named Robert Eugene Otto was gifted a handmade doll for his 4th birthday. He loved the doll so much, it is said that he actually gave the doll his first name and asked his family and friends and everybody to call him by his middle name. Now, I say it is said because I find it a little odd that a 4-year-old boy could come up with such a name exchange, but I mean, like, back then everyone was a lot more monocle and mustachy, so. The doll stands 40 inches, dressed in a sailor's uniform and stuffed with wood wool, which are basically silver cuts from logs. The doll used to have colors on his face to give him life, but with the passing of time, the colors have faded. Throughout Eugene's young life, he would play with the doll in his room like any other child would. But as time passed, something a little off was noticed. Eugene was often heard having full-scale conversations with the doll, accompanied by a giggling that wasn't coming from Eugene. When the child wasn't home, they could hear giggling coming from the room, footsteps, and even items being dragged across the floor. Now, of course, his parents never believed his stories about the doll being alive. Until one night, they were awoken to screaming and violent thrashing going on inside of the room, and bursting in expecting to find a burglar or even a kidnapper, they found their son's room completely tossed around. He was curled up, shaking in fear, and Robert was sitting upright at the end of the bed. Throughout times afterwards, the boy's obsession with the doll only grew. Toys would be destroyed, items would be broken, things would be in the wrong places, and every time they questioned the only real culprit, which could have been Eugene, he always gave his famous phrase, "Robert did it." At this point, with the room thrashing thing going on, I kind of think maybe believe the kid. It wasn't until eventually he kept on with the conversations with the doll that the family would hear another voice answer back. One of the most frightening stories to back all this up was the neighborhood children who would walk past the house would see Robert in the window only to disappear moments later. Even a plumber fell victim to Robert, as he too heard the ghostly voices of children playing, only to find he was the only one in the house. Now, Eugene eventually grew up, went to college, got married, but when he brought him and his wife back home, he gathered up some childhood items that he forgot he had, and one of them happened to be Robert. He gave the doll his own room in the attic, but his wife did not like the obsession. She requested the doll be locked away, only to find it later peering out windows, turning up in impossible places, and even the neighbors again took notice of the doll sitting in the windows where it wasn't supposed to be, only to claim that its glass eyes were following them. Eugene eventually passed away. His wife ended up moving out, leaving the doll behind, and the new owner of the house took the doll in for 20 years before donating it to the Fort East Martello Museum, kindly warning it about the dolls being haunted. I couldn't find anything about this lady's particular stories, but today Robert isn't finished. He is held in an extra tight display case. The laughing of children can still be heard, and even tragedy has been reported to those who do not ask Robert permission to take a photo of him, and then proceed to take a photo of him. Some people have gotten into immediate car wrecks afterwards. They've had their bones breaking. I'd like to say that financial ruin and even divorces are a part of this, because it has happened. I don't believe it's connected, because apparently it's so common these days that it's practically a trend on TikTok. But let me ask you this. Would you go and visit Robert one day? Well, I would if I could. But if you do go to visit Robert, can you do me a favor? Can you tell him hello from me? Legend has it that some time ago a man was walking past an abandoned farmhouse. He decided to investigate the modern day ruins, as one could only be described to be hearing the sounds of a little girl crying from inside. After going inside of the house and investigating a little bit, he noticed that the crying was coming from underneath his feet. So he went down into the basement, where he found an old corpse of a little girl grasping a doll, a small baby doll. Let's fast forward to the early 90s. We are in the Quesnel and District Museum in British Columbia. A woman brings in a small, eerie baby doll. Obviously old, face cracked, realistic glass eyes, looking to be quite old, around even 100 years old in fact. The lady told the staff that she knew it was an antique, but she decided to bring it in because she was worried that her young daughter was gonna break it by mistake at some point. The doll's name? Well, of course, it's Mandy. The staff of the museum proceeded to do their required cleansing of the doll, and to ensure there were no insects, Mandy was put into a sealed bag. It was here that, other than the uneasy feeling that the staff already had about the doll, they could hear the doll rustling in the bag when no one was looking, and apparently the doll would even change positions inside of the bag. Before Mandy was put on display, they left her in her room overnight for preparations, and when they returned to the room the next day, all of the smaller items in the room had been tossed around. Of course, this was a museum, so if this was a prank by any of the staff members, this would have not only been an expensive prank, but a very dangerous one to pull. Granted, you're working with priceless artifacts. I'm sure getting terminated would be the least of our worries at this point. Employees have had a multitude of personal items disappear that wasn't a problem before. A tapping on the glass could also be heard from both employees and visitors. She even got jealous apparently, because when employees tried setting her next to other dolls, the other doll was always found laying on the ground next to her. In one case of a lamb doll, which was placed inside of the glass display with her, only to be found outside of the display moments later. The museum contacted the former owner of the doll, and that's when she came clean about the real reason she gave up the doll. Every night, she could hear a baby crying coming from her basement, and when she went down to investigate, she saw nothing but an open window with a small breeze rolling in. It wasn't until after she donated the doll to the museum that the crying stopped and the window remained closed. I couldn't find how the original owner came to possessing such a demonic freak of a doll, but could the legends of the little girl holding Mandy be true? Is there a connection between the little girl and the owner of the doll? I think I'm just gonna leave the rest of whatever story to my own personal imagination. But stories being true, stories being not true, there are far too many stories of Mandy to discredit all of them. It is everyone's nightmare to have an intruder in your house. An unwanted guest, so to speak. You know, that situation never ends well. But what do you do when that intruder has the perfect disguise and is no longer even a person? It's like having a best friend that stabbed you in the back. I would almost rather find a camera inside of a doll head before one starts crying without any batteries. Dolls are my inanimate wasp. I hate them. I did enjoy making this episode, but you better believe this episode took a toll on my electric bill, because the whole time I made this, all the lights were on. I hate dolls. You better like and subscribe to this channel. This took a lot out of me to make. Because if you don't, I'm gonna send Robert after you. God, I'm just kidding.